Here's the good thing about what we call the church. The church is a distinctively Christian term. There's no other religion in the world that uses the word church. And so I want to start with the definition of what a church is so you can understand why this is such a high priority, not just on Sunday, but our lives. This word church originally was not a religious term. And when it was first used, the first time it was used from the old context moving into the new context was before the church ever began. And so I want to help you with that, and that's going to be in Matthew 16 that we just read today. That Jesus uses this word church, what we translate English as church, before it was ever understood, before the church was ever the church in a way that we understand it today. And so here's what the word church means. It comes from this Greek word called ekklesia. And here's what that word meant before it became what we know of as today. And that is a called out, set apart group of people that assembles. Let me say that again, because it's got a double meaning. It's people that are called out from other sections, from other areas. They're called out, they're set apart, and they're also assembled. Does that make sense? So it's almost like two parts to it. They're called out, but they're gathered separately. And it's actually a very appropriate and very good way to understand the definition of what church is. People that have been called out, set apart. In that day and age, it would have been maybe for political purposes, that they were part of a political party. Maybe today, if you had used the word church in a non-religious sense, you'd be part of a homeowners association, or maybe part of a club or a community event or something. But Jesus took this common word, this ekklesia, a set-apart, called-out group that was for a special purpose, and then he gave a new definition, a new understanding, a new life to it. And so he took the word ekklesia, this called out, set apart assembly, to something that he was going to do that's going to be distinctively under the rule and the reign and the power and the kingship of Jesus. And so today, when we think about the word church, we realize that the church is supposed to be a set apart, separate, called out assembly of people that come together. And so as we answer the question today, this begins for a few weeks that we want to look at loving the church like Jesus. It's really a very important thing that we need to understand. And so I'll give you a couple of examples I gave on our Wednesday night at the beginning of the year. One Sunday morning a few years ago, just a few moments before the service began, this big, tall young man came into the auditorium. And he met me. I was in the back, and I shook his hand, and, hey, I'm glad you're here, and I hadn't met him before. And as soon as I met him, he asked if he could speak this morning in the pulpit that morning, and that was several years ago. I'd never met this guy before in my life. He was 6'3", 6'4", man. I was having to look up to him in his 20s. And in that moment, I was a little bit shell-shocked. I wasn't sure. I knew how to answer, but I was trying to answer him in the right way. And I says, what is it you want to talk about? I was kind of curious, and so I don't know what the group or the organization or the cause he was. And I said, man, number one, I am glad you are here to attend. I hope that you will enjoy the time that we come together to focus on Jesus Christ and on who he is and what he's called for his church. I said, but I can't have you speak. And he was a little taken back at that moment. And I said, I don't know you. I said, it's nothing personal, but I don't know what you're going to say. I don't know who you are. And so I can't just have random people coming up and speaking in the pulpit on a Sunday morning. I said, but I do hope that you'll stay to hear the songs that we sing and that you'll hear the good news of Jesus, the most important message you could hear. So, man, I hope you'll enjoy a cup of coffee and a baked good, and had other people with hospitality to greet him. And so anyway, as I looked just after the service began, he made his exit really quick. So the question is, why should I have not let him come up to speak? The question is we got to answer is, what is the church? Was he the church? He may have been a nice guy. I really don't think he knew Jesus. I don't say that to be mean, just from the little bit of interaction. But was he a part of the church? Does somebody that just attends the church, are they the church? And so those are the questions we got to answer. But we need to first understand that if we understand how much Jesus loves the church, and we come to understand how much Jesus loves us, not only will we love Jesus, but we can come to really love the church. The problem is, like I said, there's been so many misunderstandings of what the church is over the years. I also ran into another man at it was a big business prayer breakfast a year or two ago. And he had a nice small business where he was trying to help people, and it seemed like a pretty good organization he had. And while I was talking to him in the midst of that conversation at that breakfast that morning, he told me he wanted to be a pastor. And I was like, man, that's fantastic. Tell me more about it. I wanted to hear his story. I wanted to hear his testimony. I wanted to hear his spiritual journey. Man, so I was excited. I'm like, man, this is going to be a great morning. And so as I asked him questions, it turns out that while he wanted to be a pastor, he wasn't a part of a church. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, did you just like recently leave a church and, you're going to another church? He's like, no. I said, so are you looking to go to another church? Or do you have a local church that you're looking to be a part of, or you're looking to change? No, not really. I just want to be a pastor. And I said, I need to help you take a couple steps back, my friend. I said, man, I think it's a noble desire if you want to be a pastor, a preacher, whatever the phrase is you want to use. I said, but that can't happen if there's not a commitment to the local church family. I said, a pastor must be a part of a local church, and that only happens if you're a part of them and you're committed to serve along with them. And I said, you've been changed by Jesus. And so while he gave an honest response to the good news of Jesus, I don't know if he was a Christian. The other part of it is that he didn't think that he needed the church to lead in this role. And so why do I share these points with you this morning? Because we need to understand the gravity and the priority of the church, of how important the church is. And we had a list we went through on Wednesday night. I'm going to share with you in the weeks to come. But there was at least about 15 different analogies that Jesus uses for the church in the New Testament. And all of them are a little bit different. We're not really going to jump into them today. But you know why there's so many different analogies to explain the church? Because there's nothing in the world like the local church. There's no organization, there's no family, there's no kingdom. There's nothing like the local church. And so that's why we need to understand how Jesus loved the church so we can come to love the church as well like Jesus did.